See if the microphone is on up there. You need to push the button. Turn it on green. Oh, okay. They're good? Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to WCBC's Candidate Forum for those seeking election as Mayor of Cumberland or to the City Council. The first part of our forum will be dedicated to candidates for City Council. There will be a total of 5 or 6 names on the ballot for City Council. Candidate Buck Taylor was unexpectedly called to work today and won't be able to participate. We have told Mr. Taylor that we will cover his positions on the top 3 issues as part of our newscast in the coming days. As many of you know, Rock Cioni is a member of the sports staff at WCBC, and aside from that, I've known him for about 50 years. We have not advised Rock of any of the questions, but we want to go the extra mile to negate any perceived advantage that he may have. Near the end of the forum, we will allow the participants to bring up an issue they may feel needs to be addressed by the panel, including Mr. Cioni. If they feel that the important issues have been adequately addressed, they can choose not to add any questions. So you all will have a fair shot, is what we're saying to you. As always, our goal tonight is to let you know more about each of our candidates. While we aim to be fair, our overriding interest is for each of the candidates to be able to communicate their positions on key issues facing the city of Cumberland. With that in mind, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each of our questions. If a candidate who has already answered is challenged by another as to his or her answer, he will be given a 30-second rebuttal. WCBC General Manager Mary Kleitz will be taking care of timing duties. She will show a red card with 30 seconds to go and then ring a bell at the end of our time. Now, if you're in the midst of a sentence, I'm going to let you finish the sentence. If you're in the midst of a paragraph, I'm going to cut you off. Our panelists tonight, WCBC News Director Brian Gowans and Greg Larry, the government reporter from the Cumberland Times News. Now, with the first question for our candidates, here is WCBC News Director Brian Gowans. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. 2 years ago, the council voted to increase taxes by nearly 10%. For those who were on the council at the time, do you stand by that decision? And for those who are running, would you have made that same decision? And if not, what services would you have cut?
Now, the way we will handle this, we'll go down the line alphabetically. For the first question, second question will go back up the line, and then we'll kind of spot around a little bit so the same person is not answering after the same person for every question. Kicking off our answers will be Seth Bernard.
Thank you. To answer the question, yes, I do stand by the decision. It was, in my 4 years on council, the hardest decision that I had to make. It was unfortunately necessary. The issue is Cumberland is a city of 20,000 people that was built for 60,000. We're all aware of that. The question is, going forward, how do we live as a city of 20,000 and, how do we live as a city of 20,000 people and live within our means, essentially? So when I made that decision, it was based on looking at public safety. Public safety takes up more than half of the general fund budget. If we had to not increase taxes, we would have been looking at layoffs. In this time of the opioid crisis and what's perceived as a higher crime rate in Cumberland, I didn't think that we could have afforded that. So I didn't necessarily like that decision that I make, but it had to be done.
Roxioni.
Thank you, buddy. Boy, that one hit me right in the face. Not long after I got on city council, took me by surprise. A couple of thoughts on it. First of all, I agree with Councilman Bernard. He's talking about 50% of the general fund is fire, ambulance, and police. If you look at it another way, our tax revenue, we collect property taxes. It takes literally almost 100%, public safety does, of our property tax money. We know the assessable tax base just was dropped another 1.7%. We're in a tough position in this city. Did I want to vote for that? Of course not. Did I feel like I had any choice? I really didn't, to be totally honest. We were given other choices. I think one of them was as high as a 20% increase. I would not have voted for that. When I looked around to see and talk to the comptroller's office and the city administrator, to the mayor, who's been around for a long time, about where we could cut, I didn't know where we could cut after talking to everyone. Our rec department is bare bones. When we had a forum or a get-together at Fort Hill High School last year, prior to the vote, I think it's fair to say 100% of the people stood up and spoke, indicated they wanted absolutely no changes, no reductions in ambulance services, police, or fire. And I get that. I understand that. We have an aging community, both from the infrastructure and from the standpoint of the demographics. So, thank you.
John Fetchero.
Thank you, Paul. No, I do not believe the 9.75 tax increase was the right decision. I believe the mayor and city council could have looked harder and deeper at the budget to find a way to balance the budget and establish an increase that is more in line with that of previous years' increases, being on par with the rate of inflation, something in the 1-2% category. We probably needed an increase with the rising healthcare cost, but I thought upwards of 10% was critically damaging to the representation of the management of our city. That being said, we need to consider how and why we got into this situation to begin with. The rising level of indebtedness the city incurred for infrastructure projects, including the Maryland Avenue redevelopment project, led to additional debt service payments and the deterioration of the city's credit score. Prior to the project, the city was considered to be operating in the black without a structural budget deficit. Since 2012, the city has ordered 8 bond issuances for water, sewer, as well as general fund provisions. Total debt issued since 2012 has been $29.22 million. Total debt issued for the Maryland Avenue redevelopment project comes in at $5.25 million. This debt service comes to $2.5 million under the 2018 budget, which is 13% of total tax levy revenue, or 13% of total revenue and 21% of our tax levy. So significant.
Thank you. Wayne Hedrick.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Well, of course, I was not in the room when the decision was made, but I have seen the city's budget, and it looks pretty lean. I agree with John that the debt service that the city has is pretty high, and perhaps they're in hindsight, maybe things could have been changed in the past, but we can't go back and change that. We are where we are, and the city needed that in order to remain solvent. So, and I certainly am not in favor of decreasing our paid fire department or our police department in any way at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvester Young.
Thank you, Paul. I believe that because of a lack of a proper budget and a necessity for our public services, that the decision came to what it needed to be. It wasn't a popular one, but I believe it was the right decision that needed to be made because we didn't have options to go from there. It was a very minimal lack of options of what to do, and instead of cutting the necessities that we needed, we decided to raise taxes. And like I said, it wasn't the popular thing to do, but I believe universally here at the table, all the candidates, we believe that no, we should not cut our public services any more than what we have here. So I believe that, yes, the right decision was made, even though it wasn't the popular one. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Cumberland Times News reporter Greg Larry. Oh, okay, sure. We have a 30-second rebuttal. We'll hold off on that. We'll go to the 30 seconds.
One of the issues that was brought up was the debt services. Economic development is an investment. Without projects like Rolling Mill, then the future generations of Cumberland can absolutely expect more tax increases.
Roxioni wanted to go.
The last tax increase prior to the one we invoked the other 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, was I think in 2009. In fact, the group back then voted down a less than 2% tax increase, and for the rest of the time up until that increase, there were no increases. So that was not an option. They didn't do that. Lastly, buddy, in talking to the experts, the people that rate cities and their debt service have come in and said that Cumberland's debt service, the amount owed, is normal for a municipality like ours.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the next question and Greg Larry. Greg?
All right, thank you, Paul. My question is in regard to the bridges on the west side. As everyone knows, we have bridges closed on Cumberland Street, Fayette Street, and Washington Street. We've got a problem with the underpass, the railroad bridge on Green Street. Are you satisfied with progress? We've spent a lot of time on ownership. Next month will be the 1-year anniversary of the closing of Cumberland Street, so that one's been closed for a year. Fayette just closed just in July. Washington Street closure goes back to 2012. Are you satisfied with the progress on trying to get these bridges rebuilt?
And we'll start at Sylvester Young this time around. Sylvester.
Thank you, Paul. And personally, no, I'm not. I'm not satisfied with the way that things are going, but it's like me. Like I said, I'm not the most business savvy person when it comes to those type of questions. I look at it as though, like you said, the big fight has been over ownership. I have a very simplistic look at it. I said, yeah, the people need the use of those bridges. Okay. I believe that what should have happened is there should have been a totaling of whatever money that needed to be used to fix the bridges, and it'd be split down the middle. City pays half, CSX pays half to get the problem solved. Like I said, I know it's not the most practical answer. It's not the most business savvy answer, but it would have gotten the problem taken care of as soon as possible.
Okay. Wayne Hedrick.
Yes, thank you. Let's see, 2012, huh? Yeah, that's quite a while. Trying to cross this city these days is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we've got all these bridges shut down, and then if you try and bypass them by growing up Green Street, then you run into all the work that's being done by Columbia Gas. So am I satisfied with the progress that we've made on repairing the bridges? Not really. Do I understand that there's some contentious issues behind that? Yeah, I do. It appears as if CSX severely damaged 2 of our bridges and then has made a determined effort to avoid doing anything to try and help us fix it. That's the way it appears to me, and I'm not privy to, the negotiations which have been ongoing. But I just feel like it's been dragging on for a really long time, and the very least we could have done is trying to arrange something with, a company like Columbia Gas, not to work in a particular area where we actually need that roadway to get around our city. It's like a war-torn country, getting from one end of this city to the other, So, no, not particularly satisfied.
John Petro.
I'm not satisfied with the status of. So, is everything okay?
Let's see. Go ahead and try it again. Green on.
Green on.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, there we go. No, I'm not satisfied with the situation on the west side. Frankly, nothing has changed about this situation that couldn't have been remedied 6 years ago. CSX, all along, their position has been, please just accept responsibility. That will take 80% of the burden off of us, put it onto the federal dole, which, let's face it, it's at, the debt is at 19 trillion, something like that. They can weather it on the federal level. Why burden our stakeholders? Why burden our partners with the full cost of this bridge? Why don't we work with them? Maybe do a favor for them. They'll reciprocate down the line at some point in time, I'm sure, given their footprint in the city, and we could all move forward, and we could all have bridges today, and it'd be fine. I've lived in Cumberland most of my life. I've lived in other places. I've lived in Baltimore County, Colorado. Never ever heard of a situation where you had cities with failed bridges that are, and that status quo is allowed to stand. I mean, it's unacceptable. It's a public safety issue. It's business unfriendly. And I don't know how we can draw a business in and talk about economic development when you can't even get around town. I mean, it blows my mind. So, no, I'm not happy about it, and I'm looking forward to working with CSX to get things patched up. Thank you.
Roxioni.
Absolutely not. But to have the city be out front as taking the brunt of it, I think, is a little bit unfair. Anybody that grew up in Cumberland probably knew somebody that repaired bridges that worked for the B&O or CSX or Chessie over their lifetime. So I personally, and I think I'm speaking for people at City Hall, I was stunned when they denied ownership of the bridges. And by the time I think we recovered from being stunned by that, we were in no man's land. First, there was concerns that if you were too aggressive with CSX, given the current climate, would they take jobs from Cumberland? I don't know if that was a reality or not, but it was a concern. Why don't you sue them? Well, our attorney, every attorney I talked to beyond our city attorney said, be careful what you wish for. You can take anybody to court, but there's no guarantee you're going to win, and they have deep, deep, deep pockets. And all of that proved to be true. What I dreaded was having to stand in front of my neighbors and vote for taking ownership of the bridges and taking on that responsibility for the next 1,000 years. That's kicking the can down the road. As it turns out, it looks like now, finally, and I think it is because they hit the bridges, to be frank with you, we probably have a really good, solid deal in place. Am I satisfied that it took this long? Absolutely not. But it looks like the city's going to come out of this with 3 bridges and very, very little money coming out of taxpayers' pockets. And that looks to be, the chances of that look to be excellent as of just yesterday, Paul.
Thank you. Seth Bernard.
I'm going to echo a little bit of what Rock said. If you had asked me 6 months ago if I was satisfied, absolutely not. I think one of the issues was the city wasn't forceful enough with CSX. But again, I think we were trying to play the good neighbor. We didn't want to be too forceful. Am I satisfied currently? Absolutely. I think that through the work of our negotiating team, through even CSX and even the citizens that have come out who live in Washington Street and have been so vocal and helpful, I think that we're moving in a really good direction. It's certainly no coincidence that CSX is now sitting down at the table after they hit 2 bridges back in April or May. So they see what is going on. They see the situation, and now they're acting on it. But as of now, we've got 2 deals for 2 of the bridges, and as Rock mentioned, the city is essentially on the hook for $0. It's currently ongoing for negotiations with Washington Street, but I think we're optimistic. And so, yeah, currently I am satisfied. Leading up to it, no.
Thank you. We're at a point in our hour where we will take a break. We would like to thank Allegheny Media. Well, do you have a response? No. Okay. Okay, very good. We're going to take a break. We'd like to thank our friends at Allegheny Media for our video feed on Facebook and our YouTube channel on our website. And we will continue with our City Council candidate forum after these messages on WCBC. Okay, we're coming back. And welcome back. And with our next question, WCBC's Brian Gallants. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. Although not all the properties have been secured, the Rolling Mill redevelopment project is moving forward. In your opinion, can the project succeed without the remaining dozen or so properties? And would you advocate the use of eminent domain to finish the project if necessary?
During the break, I was given grief by all of our candidates about the order in which I was picking to go, but this is the way we do it. Richard Roxioni will answer first.
Repeat it, Brian, because you said I was ready
The
for
Rolling Mill project is moving forward, even though there's about a dozen houses that still haven't been purchased. Do you think the project can succeed even if you don't have those houses? And would you consider eminent domain to get those properties?
I consider the expert as the developer. Mr. Scott is a successful developer. That's one of the reasons he was chosen. He has expressed to us he's absolutely confident that he can go as is. He's willing to work with anyone who has not sold, and I understand he has already done some of that. I think it will be successful. I think how slowly it's moved is troublesome to everyone. I came in when this the first 2.5 million was already allocated, but I won't use that as any kind of way to duck it. I think that there is a strategic plan that was put in place. There was a study done, and I think the administration prior to me coming on board decided enough of just putting studies on the shelf. They brought that one down. They used it. It's described to me by the experts if it was kind of a risk to do what we did and how the city did it, but the developer has given the city kudos for having the courage to step up, to do it the way we did it, to spend money to clear the site so that it'll make it more attractive for a developer to get in there. I personally would like to get money off the people going by Cumberland all the time that typically stop in LaVale. I'd like to start getting some of that revenue in our pockets as they go back to the wealthier areas of Maryland. And I don't think there's any question that if we get a hotel there, and I think we will, that the revenue is going to be greater than what we had before. Eminent domain, I'd hate.
Finish your line.
Okay. I would hate to be in that position to have to vote for eminent domain. And I think the developer has given us the confidence that that will not be something we'll have to consider, that what I think they call it infill. He's going to be building around the existing homes.
All righty. Next will be Wayne Hedrick. Wayne?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the Rolling Mills project, boy. So I've heard a couple different figures about how much money we have spent on this project in the form of bonds being secured by the city. Just last night I was told that number was $3.5 to maybe $3.75 million. I was also been told time and time again that the whole purpose of this project is to increase the tax base. Okay. And then, of course, I heard a number here this evening that might be, what, $5.5 million or whatever. Okay, but the pre-tax base, if I recall correctly, because I was there when the developer was given his spiel at City Hall, and I think the destruction tax base was like $26,000 or something like that. It wasn't a whole lot, and I believe one of the estimates is that post development there might be like 60,000 tax base. So you got to increase somewhere around $40,000. Maybe it's more. Okay, let's say it's $100,000. Okay, let's say that. How long is it going to take us to get back our $5.5 or $3.75 million? Will I be alive to see us go back into the black? I don't know. I don't know if I'll live that long. Yeah. And as far as eminent domain, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth Bernard.
The question was, can it succeed without eminent domain? I think it can. I think the conversations that we've had with the developer, as Rock had mentioned, there's no indication that will be necessary. I think from the start, this project was 100% absolutely necessary and vital to Cumberland. Is it the solution to Cumberland's problems? Absolutely not. It is one piece out of many that will eventually help this town get back to the point where we don't have to worry about tax increases, about how much our public safety costs, about which streets are we going to pave this year. This is one piece out of many that will get us to where we need to be.
John Fetchero.
Thank you, Paul. I do support the project in that I want to see a return on investment. The city has borrowed over $5.25 million for this project, with the CEDC almost entirely focused on this project. With their annual budget at over $300,000, we absolutely must turn a corner on this project. I will not support any more debt issuance at this time, and I will not support eminent domain. The developer needs to move forward with the infitting process and negotiate amicable buyouts with the remaining property owners. From the beginning, this project needed better management and a clear budget. The all-or-none approach presents an opportunity cost in not being able to develop other projects or support new investment opportunity. with all of our eggs in one basket, classically known as a cardinal sin in terms of investing, whereas diversification presents the best strategy to mitigate against risk and provide steady gains. I do believe the mayor and city council believe this project was the right way to move forward, but in the absence of an operational budget, timeline, private sector partnership, or benchmarks, this project to this point cannot be considered successful. Just for folks scoring at home about this debt issuance, and it seems to be that we're wavering on what happened, I'll read off the ordinances. 2015 ordinance number 3793, $2.5 million. Revised in 2016 for upwards of another $1 million, 3.5. Ordinance number 3794 for $1.746 million was actually supposed to go towards a debt incurred from Memorial Hospital, and was that money was actually transferred to this project as well. So that's where I came up with the $5.25 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvester Young.
Okay, is it okay if I ask the question be repeated? It's been so long since I heard it.
Sure. Although not all the properties have been purchased yet, the Rolling Mill project is moving forward. Do you think that project can succeed even if those other properties aren't purchased? And would you support eminent domain to secure those properties?
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I do believe that the project couldn't succeed in its current state without obtaining the dozen or so properties that have not been obtained. Like I said, I'm all for anything that improves the city, even if it means buying out properties to bring in businesses here. No to the eminent domain. That seems to have been what the initial issue was that held up a lot of the productivity of the project. So that would be it. And that seems to be what I've been hearing universally up here at the table. And I agree with that, no to eminent domain. But yes, I do believe that the project can be beneficial as is.
Before we move on, Wayne brought up a point that a lot of money has been spent, and how long is it going to take for us to see a return on that just from the Rolling Mill area? Now, you may have a different opinion of that. If you'd like to express that in maybe a 60-second form, do you agree with Wayne's assessment there? And if you don't, is there more money out there to be had from the investment in just the Rolling Mill area for the city? Could you guys go into that a little bit? Rock, you go first, and then we'll go back to Wayne.
Thank you, buddy. If you look at Rolling Mill just as Rolling Mill and not the aspect of spinning off of Rolling Mill, which has already, by the way, started. Properties are now being bought by developers down from Rolling Mill going toward Old Town Road. There's a building, a new business going to go in down there. I think the last I heard, 5 or 7 of those properties have already been purchased for demolition for businesses. If you look at just Rolling Mill, then you miss the big picture. And the big picture is that eventually there'll be development all the way down Maryland Avenue to Old Town Road. It looks like the federal government is going to tear down and rebuild Fort Cumberland homes as they did with Benjamin Banneker. That's already looks to be a given. So if you look at it as a corridor going down there with all those, not all those homes are dilapidated, but a good many are, all of those removed and replaced by businesses or housing that can generate tax revenue, then I think you get a different picture of what the city's been trying to do with Rolling Mill. It's too bad Rolling Mill became the face of the CEDC because it's more than Rolling Mill.
Okay, Wayne, you're next. You caught my ear with that because I guess we're about the same age, and I said, boy, will we all be dead by the time we get the money back? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that that was an answer to that question. I mean, the question, as I see it, is will we ever live to see back in the black after all this red that we're incurring on this project? And more projects, is that the answer? I don't know. It seems to me like real estate speculation does make developers rich, but does it help us? Yeah, I'm not sure. Not so sure about that. I think in the long run, there are people making money off of this, and people will make money. But will the citizens of Cumberland live long enough to see the return on this investment? I still am not sure about the answer to that question.
Thank you. Seth Bernard, you're next.
I think Wayne is looking for a yes, we will see, or no, and I don't. I think the answer is I don't know in terms of rolling mill, but again, there's a bigger picture, as Rockin mentioned, and I sort of mentioned in my response, is that it's not just about rolling mill. It's about getting people off the interstate to see what is in Cumberland. Now, will everyone who drives up 68 and gets off for food or whatever at the Maryland Avenue redevelopment project, once it's finished, will they go into Cumberland? No. But if 10 people had been driving by before, and those 10 people get off now, if 5 of them come into Cumberland and they think, wow, this is a nice little town. I like this, this setup. Once we get Baltimore Street redeveloped, they're going to see those sort of things and they're going to talk about it and they'll know to be back. So will we see a return from rolling mill in your lifetime, Wayne? I don't know. But in my children's lifetime, I think absolutely.
All right. Seth's children are younger than Wayne. we can say that. John Petro, what say you?
I've crunched the numbers a little bit. I don't have I can't give you the exact number, but my feeling is I'll still be alive, but I'll be collecting Social Security. Thank you.
Okay. And Sylvester Young, how about your opinion?
From what I've heard, I've just heard a lot of passing the buck so far instead of a straightforward answer for the most part. I believe that it depends on what goes there. It depends on what business is brought in, because if it generates jobs, if it generates the buzz that'll get people to actually go there, then yeah, we'll see it. But if it's the same stuff that we already have in different areas of the city, then no, we're not going to see that at all.
Thank you. With our next question, Greg Larry.
Thank you, Paul. And Sylvester, that segued beautifully right into my question. That's where I was going to go with this. Keeping on the topic of the rolling mill, since it's pretty much is the city's biggest project going right now, there's a lot at stake there. Yesterday, we had to talk about the contract between the developer and the city. They talked about some of the things they'd like to see there or might see there. Restaurants mentioned were Dunkin' Donuts, Panera Bread, Chipotle, Five Guys were just some of the restaurants. For a convenience store, maybe Wawa or Royal Farms. These are businesses that the developer has worked with in the past. So my question is, do you have any concerns about what's going to go in there? Because Councilman Eugene Frazier, of course, voted against the contract as it stands with concerns about that very issue. Are we going to be able to get what we want in there, or does the developer end up making a decision and have too much authority as far as what goes in there? So do you have any concerns with what type of businesses will go into the plaza there?
This time around, Wayne Hendrick will go first.
Yes. Well, yes, I do have concerns about that, because it sounds like, all the businesses that you mentioned, they don't sound like living wage jobs to me. They sound like second jobs, or a job that you might need another job in order to get by having. So yeah, having something off the exit for people to pull off, yeah, that's a great idea, but is this going to be a boon for the working people of Cumberland? Probably not. Low paying jobs are easy to find in Cumberland. Most people I know have 2 of them. So, I don't see that as a great boon for the pockets of the workers of the city. That's all.
Next will be Roxioni.
I think the question is, do I have concern about the type of businesses it will attract? Well, first, sure I do. First of all, Councilman Frazier neglected one thing last night, and I think he may be like me. He's getting older. He forgot. Basically, federal and state law both prohibit the mayor and city council from dictating what business can come into a community within reason. There's land use regulations, even a federal law. I'm going to read dormant commerce. If that means anything to you, Greg. Clause doctrine in the 1986 court case. So when it comes right down to it, we're in a situation with a developer where, let's face it, we are partly negotiating goodwill with a gentleman who has going to put a lot of money into this place. He wants it to be successful. I can't for the life of me think why he would bring in something there that wasn't going to make money, wasn't going to be something that he would benefit from. He is not interested, and he said this, he's not interested. He's already turned down, I think, 2 businesses that exist in Cumberland who were interested in going to Rolling Mill because he didn't want to do a duplication and just move the tax dollars around. And I have to say, so yes, so there's a concern, but the city can only do so much by federal and state law. You cannot restrict commerce simply because you don't like a certain business. The mayor and city council do not have that power. Let me just state, if I have a second left, let me just state again, if you see Rolling Mill as just Rolling Mill and not the bigger picture, I would submit that you are missing the bigger picture.
Sylvester Young.
Thank you. Like I did state earlier, yes, it does depend on what goes in. From all that we've heard so far, maybe a hotel, maybe more food places there. I don't see how that will ultimately help that area. Like you said, maybe a Wawa. You have Martin's right down the street. That's gonna take business away from that store. You have 7-Eleven right up the street. You have Papa John's there. Bringing in, even if it's a sit-down eatery, yes, you'll pull away from other businesses there. You need stuff that's not already in the vicinity. So one of the things that I've always said is we don't have enough entertainment for the youth, teenagers, young adults there. Something that will bring in them to spend money in that area instead of having to go out of town. Another hotel, I'm not so sure. I mean, yeah, we'll have people coming from out of town, tourism. I don't understand how big it is now. I mean, I've heard of how huge it's been in the past, but I don't see what is attracting people now. But if we had more people coming into town, yeah, hotel would be amazing there because that's more access to downtown. But to be honest with you, to be honest with you, if we had things that actually benefited that area instead of stuff that's already there, yes, it'll be great.
John Fetchero.
Thanks, Paul. No, I don't have any particular issue with any of the businesses proposed or those not proposed. The businesses on the list of prohibited businesses, I would agree with. Strip clubs, adult stores, those kind of things are not what we particularly want. But otherwise, I'm pretty much a free market guy, and let's put it in and see how it goes. Just a note here, I just want to say that I deeply respect Councilman Frazier, and if that was his decision, and I think we should accept independent-minded thinking on our council. And if someone votes no, it's not the end of the world. It's fine. They're right. We're not bound by districts or wards here. Councilmen are free agents. We can think independently, and we don't have to have this 5-0 thing all the time. And if that was his decision, then let's respect that. Thank you.
Seth Bernard.
Concerned? No, I'm not concerned. I think for me, just interested is a good word to use there. As Rock mentioned, government cannot dictate commerce. So we can't say no McDonald's, no this and that. So I think the concern there from Councilman Frazier, maybe the characterization was a little bit off, but Wayne also mentioned a good point that these businesses that we've got going in, are they going to be businesses that allow for a living wage for people? Can someone working at, say, a restaurant provide for a family of four. No, absolutely not. But we have to look at the aspect of, and I'm going to use a scientific term here, stuff. Cumberland needs stuff. If we want to attract the young professionals who are going to have jobs at, say, IBM, who absolutely do pay living wages, then we need stuff. They're not going to move to Cumberland when they've got so much other options of dining, of shopping in D.C. and Hagerstown and Frederick. We need these things in Rolling Mill, even though they're not something that's going to allow me to provide a living wage for my family of four. There are. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, everybody's got 30-second option here. Wayne, you can go first.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that although I've heard here tonight twice that we can't dictate what sort of business go in there, it seems to me like we were sold that bill of goods whenever this whole project started, that we would be able to dictate who couldn't go in there, and now we're being told, well, no, maybe not.
Okay. Rock, did you have?
Yeah,
okay.
a couple things. I don't know if that was the impression or not. I think Wayne might be right in the beginning. There seemed to be some conversation that it would be more liberal than that. I think Mr. Scott has been pretty straightforward about what he wants in there, and that's been pretty satisfactory to us. The whole issue of the kind of businesses that go in there, if you're a developer, why would you want something in there that wouldn't succeed? And government is not, I don't know that government creates jobs unless you're in Washington, D.C. in the Defense Department. I think what we can do as a city council is make our community more livable so people might want to come here and bring small businesses.
Seth Bernard wants to chime in for 30.
I think the confusion is government cannot say no McDonald's, no Walmart, but we can say no dollar stores, no fast food, no tanning salons.
Since you were approached directly about that, Wayne, I'll let you go one more time on this question.
Thank you. So that means that if the developer wants to put a dollar store in there, there's absolutely no way that he can do so. Is that what that means?
We'll go back to Councilman Bernard.
From my understanding, it's a conversation that would have to take place at that point.
So there could be a dollar store put in there.
Essentially, with the current administration and our desires, no.
Just as an example, a dollar store, or whatever other thing is on that list that we say we don't want, there's still a chance that this developer could say, "Look, you're keeping us from making our money. We're going to lose that $600,000 or a portion thereof because we can't fulfill our contract and fill all these lots. Okay, because you're keeping us from putting this dollar store in there. We got waiting to come in."
Okay. Well, we're going a little bit back and forth, but if we want to, we can.
I think again that comes back to what Councilman Cioni was saying is the developer is going to look at these businesses and say what is going to make money. At the end of the day, are they going to make money on a dollar store as opposed to, say, a Panera Bread? And I think the answer is no. And in that situation, you've got to have some faith in free enterprise to be able to survive, essentially.
All right. And Rock, we'll go to you one more time.
Let me just be clear. I'm all for the community trying to create jobs. I don't think the government can create jobs. I think the government's role is to make this city of now 20,000 people with an infrastructure that was made for 40,000 people and it's crumbling to do the best they can to make the community as livable looking from the outside so that we have to increase the population of Cumberland. I've heard estimates as much as 5,000 people in the city limits, not in Allegheny County, to begin to climb out of this hole that I didn't create, Seth didn't create, Mayor Grimm didn't create. It's been going on for 35 years.
Okay, very good. A note from our producer that Rolling Mill was not designed as a project to attract high-paying jobs. It was about the tax base when it all first came up. And, well, okay. Okay, go ahead, Rock. We'll put you on.
I understand the new motel out off of 68 will generate about $70,000 in property tax revenue. And our developer has assured us he wants a hotel down there bad.
Okay.
So,
he doesn't mind paying taxes as long as he gets the income. There we go. All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue now with our forum back to the regular format a little bit. You guys were all great there. I appreciate that discussion. I think we all got a little bit out of that. And Brian Gowans has another question. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. Seth, you just made mention of something the current administration would do. Obviously, there's a chance for the makeup to change. And there are two candidates for mayor sharply divided on some key issues. Without falling into the I can work with anyone, who do you prefer to work with next go-around?
We'll go to John Fetcherow first on this one.
Thank you, Paul.
No, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah. Thank you both. My preference, I think, ideologically, I align more with Mr. Morris, but I've come to know Mr. Grimm very well through this process, and I have a great deal of respect for him, too. And it's up to the voters, and that decision is out of my control, and I'm just prepared to work with whoever the voters put in place. That will be the team the voters want to see going forward, and I will do my best to work in that framework.
Okay, we'll go next to Sylvester Young III.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
You can thank Brian again.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. That was a very loaded question. But looking at what we've been presented from both candidates, I believe, just like John, I'd probably look forward more to working with Mr. Morris. But like I said, I like he said too, respect both men, respect their message, and if voted on, I will work with either one.
Let's go up to the other end of the table and Seth Bernard.
I'm not going to thank you, Brian. So, look, I have known Mayor Grimm for many years, before I was even on council. I respect him very much. I think that he has done a great deal for our city. Having said that, I also have gotten to know Mr. Morris over the last year of campaigning. I think that he brings a lot of good ideas to the table. So I'm going to agree with John on this one and say that at the end of the day, this is the voters' decision. I didn't want to make this council campaign about which mayoral candidate any of us like. I think that distracts from what we're doing, because at the end of the day, someone on council has just as much power in their vote as the mayoral candidate or the mayor. So I'm gonna lob this ball back to you, Brian, and say I will work great with whoever is elected. So,
Wayne Hedrick.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I like the insurgents personally. So yeah. But I don't have anything against anybody in this room. I could work with really with any of them. Okay. I just know that I have some ideas to go a different direction, and I think that I might face more resistance with those ideas, or even hashing out some sort of ideas with people who already have their mind set on what they're going to do. So, yeah, I think that I would really love working with John and Sylvester and Eugene and really any insurgent candidates. Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll have to ask the mayoral candidates which one is the insurgent. Roxiona, you're next.
Wow, boy, thanks, Brian. I think I've worked effectively with Mayor Grimm. I do have respect for Brian. There haven't been a lot of people in the last 10 or 12 years that have stepped up in the city to run for anything. and Brian has done that, and he's done it repeatedly. I think he worked really hard at bringing a new face to the city, the face he wanted portrayed, that we're active and there's things going on and it's a viable city, and I think the city should be all forever grateful to him. I'm not speaking out of school. He doesn't particularly approve of my style because he thinks I'm, says I operate in the weeds too much. Is that it? Meaning I'm too much of an activist on the council. So we do disagree on that, but in a professional way. We don't get heated about that. I've talked to Ray a lot of times. I'm 71 years old. I've worked with my boss, who I love to death, was one of the toughest people to work for that you could possibly have, and I worked very, very effectively with him. And in talking to Ray, talking to Brian, I just have had a wealth of experience working with different kind of people. And I'm not dodging the question, Brian. That's how I feel about it. I'm fortunate that I've had enough experiences in my life through the military, through my civilian employment, and the people that have mentored me to teach me how to get along with people, find the strengths in them, find the good in them, and hopefully they'll find the good in you, and they'll find the strengths in you that they want to use as the mayor to help them meet their mission and to meet their goals.
We're going to take another time out and be back in a moment. And when we do, we'll ask that question. If we haven't covered something that you thought we should have, or you thought maybe we're a little bit too easy on it, we'll let each of you give us a little bit of a critique, and then we'll finish up with a couple questions here on the forum. We continue after this with our partners at Allegheny Media and Facebook here on 1270 AM and 103.1 FM and WCBCRadio.com. We're back in a moment. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our forum here at Allegheny College of Maryland in the Continuing Education Center. And we will continue now at our forum. We told our candidates that if we missed something that they had heard about on the campaign trail that you think that we missed and we should be talking about, let's bring it up now where we have about 15 minutes to go, and maybe we can delve into it a little bit deeper before we get on with another question from Greg Larry. Let me go down the panel alphabetically. Seth, are we doing okay? You can use the microphone.
Would you like me to bring up something that maybe we haven't covered yet? Or?
Well, if you'd like to.
Okay.
Or if you think we're going okay right now.
I think that you're doing great, Paul.
Okay. Well, Brian and Greg are doing
and
great.
Brian and Greg.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, Rock, how about you? Are we doing all right?
Yeah, I think we're doing very well. I think you're right. I think that last exchange will give the voters some ideas of what the differences are between us. It's very easy to say you shouldn't have done this. It's much easier. It's more difficult to say I would have done that. And I think that's the advantage when you're not in office you have of saying I wouldn't have done that, but what are your ideas? And so
Okay.
we got to some of that.
All right. John, how about you? John Petro.
Thank you, Paul. I think we're doing a great job tonight, and I'd just honestly like to see what the gentlemen have to, throw at us. Really.
Okay.
I think they've
Very
been doing
good.
a great job.
Wayne, are we okay?
Hey, yeah, thanks for this opportunity. I would like to bring up something. I'd like to see how our candidates would consider addressing the opioid problem that we have in this city, because as I have been campaigning, meeting with people, talking to people, that's one thing that I hear about. Everybody's concerned about it. I mean, kids are finding needles in the streets and stuff at their bus stops. How would we move forward on this project? I've got some ideas, but
Okay.
I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
Okay. Let's go to Sylvester Young first to see if we got any questions out there that he wants to add to the mix. We're okay? He's good. Okay. Well, let's do 60 seconds on the opioid problem. I know that's pretty limited time to do that, but it has been a problem here in Cumberland, especially in the last 5 years. Seth?
Yeah, so I'll try and get this in 60 seconds. Last year, obviously this is a big concern of mine as well. I came across a program that was being done at a town in Ohio. It was a drug prevention program for high school students, and essentially what it is it's a club or organization, call it whatever you'd like, where the students, if they choose to join this organization, they get discounts at local businesses, Chick-fil-A or whatever. They also get scholarships raffled off throughout the school year. Now the stipulation is they are subject to drug screenings throughout the school year. I thought this might be a good idea for our community, so I approached the Board of Education last September, October, pitched them my idea. They got back to me November, December last year. They greenlit it. So what I've been doing over this past year is I formed several committees, and we have begun forming this organization for Allegheny County high schools, and hopefully this coming school year in next fall it will be greenlit, or it will be good to go, rolled out. So,
Roxioni.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, Wayne. I guess what was that movie, A Man for All Seasons? Maybe I'm a man for this time because of all of us up here, I guess I'm the only one that spent his entire life working in addictions and mental health. Addictions from the standpoint of young people as young as 12 to, of course, adults. Literally spent my whole life in addictions. I'm not a recovering addict, but I have worked in addictions since first got interested, in fact, when I was a medic in Vietnam. And heroin addiction became somewhat of not a crisis, but somewhat of a problem in the unit I was assigned to. So that's one thing. It'll always be on the radar as long as I'm in office because of that. That was my life's work. I've voted for everything. We have a heroin czar now. I voted for that. I voted in favor of that. The State Streets initiative that we've had, I've voted for that each time. Anytime they've shown any interest in enhancing that program and funding was available, I've voted for that. We just finished voting to accept a grant to increase the amount of overtime available specific to drug investigations prior to making drug busts.
John Fetchero.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Wayne, for bringing this question to light. This issue touches me very personally. It was actually yesterday. We had the 2-year anniversary of my niece's death to fentanyl. She had overdosed and she didn't make it. She was 27. So I understand about this issue very personally, and I want to work very hard to address this issue. It really upsets me to see young people making those choices, and I feel there's a component of mental health there and the component of addiction, but there's a component of hopelessness and outlook, and that's from socioeconomic factors. The Appalachian region has been very touched by this issue, but it hasn't been nationwide. There's states that don't have the proliferation of this issue, and I promise I'm going to work very hard to see that this scourge comes to an end. Thank you.
Wayne?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this issue. My main concern here, in the meantime, to try and get a handle on what we're dealing with here, because it is widespread and a lot of people are overdosing, not just the ones who die, okay, but many people overdose and they live, okay. But I want to approach this problem from a standpoint of harm reduction. How do we stop kids from running across needles in the streets? How do we stop people from ODing on fentanyl when they thought they were getting their regular, drug, okay? But it turns out it was laced with something much more powerful, much more dangerous, okay? Well, lots of people or lots of other communities have come to a conclusion on this, and that is through needle exchanges or through, safe injection sites, okay, which maybe the city of Cumberland couldn't fund on its own, okay? But with cooperation from our county partners and maybe the state and grants, we might be able to set up something where addicts could go. There would be trained counselors on site that could help them, and they could test the drugs that they're using before they kill themselves with them.
Let me follow up that very quickly. You're proposing a needle exchange program for Cumberland then?
Either a needle exchange or safe injection site. I mean, let's face it, this is an epidemic that is killing our children. It's killing our siblings. It's killing parents, kids. It's killing lots of people. And, it's a serious thing. And before we can get a handle on it, we have to stop the deaths.
Thank you. Sylvester Young.
Here locally, my church, City Reach Cumberland here, where I've done a lot of background stuff, so I'm not like the face of anything there. They have what's called Hope Homes, where they bring in people that are dealing with addictions, and they go through the program there, which it's a lot of education and all types of different things that deal with the program, and they've had massive success with this program. We need something on that level, but within the county or within the city. So I would want to propose something with educational process of it to get people to understand what's out there. Like Wayne was saying, with the needle exchanges or with, you said, safe injection sites, and just to educate the people on what's really out there so that they know properly what's out there to help prevent it.
Thank you. One more question in the forum will come from Greg Larry. Greg?
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts on the opioid addictions, which I think we all know somebody that's been unfortunately touched in some way by that. We're going to switch gears a little bit and go to the downtown. I don't think we've talked about yet. Your feelings about the downtown project. I think it's a $5 to $7 million project. We're going to open it up with a street running from Mechanic Street all the way through to George Street, one way. Pretty expensive project. Do you favor it? Do you think it will help the downtown as far as maybe attracting businesses, getting to jumpstart some growth in the downtown? I want to get your thoughts on the project on the mall.
And we'll start with Sylvester Young first on this question. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Greg, for the question. With downtown, the issue with downtown right now is, yes, you have your mom and pop places down there. You have your dollar stores. You have your restaurants. Opening it up, you may get more traffic there. Maybe. Yes, cars will come through. People will get to see it as they drive past. But there's still a lot of empty buildings in downtown. So, yes, I am all for anything that brings growth. But if you can't guarantee that you're bringing more business into those empty buildings that are downtown, you're going to have the same results. People will drive past. You'll get the same people that come and eat outside. You'll get the same people going to those same dollar stores, and nothing will grow.
Wayne Hedrick.
Yes, thank you for this question. Initially, when I first heard about this plan to tear up our beautiful mall downtown, I was opposed. I felt like, man, it's a bad idea. Because, I mean, really, I don't think that opening up to traffic is actually going to increase business by that great amount, okay? But the infrastructure underneath those streets, apparently there's grants then that are only available to us if we put in a road, okay? And so given that, I would say, yeah, let's take advantage of those grants and let's upgrade this infrastructure while we have the opportunity, as long as we're not incurring a bunch of additional debt that's going to be hard for us to pay down. But I believe that really right now, brick and mortar stores, I mean, they're struggling everywhere. I mean, first the malls shut down our downtown mall, and now the malls are starting to fail, and I really don't see downtown revitalizing greatly because of a road being put in. Okay, although I do agree that if we can take advantage of grant money to fix the infrastructure, we should do so.
Thank you. John Fetchero.
Thank you, Paul. I am a supporter of the project. Like Wayne, I was somewhat slow to come along with the project, and seeing some of our other unfinished projects around the city, I was a little bit hesitant. But after seeing the governor's remarks there on the bricks and seeing the project evolve as it has, I'm a supporter of it. We are a culture of drive-through and drive up to people. So it stands to reason that if you can pull into a spot and hop right out of your car, go into a store and come right back out and get going again, well, that's great. And that's what we all want to do. So I am supportive of that. I don't think it's going to be a panacea for economic development in our area. We need to find we need to nurture small business and then bring in some mid-size and, if we can, large-size business so we can get those better paying jobs so they can support the retail. It was industry that came first, then the downtown mall was developed. That's the proper chronological order of things. And so that's really where our economic development focus needs to be. But that being said, I am supportive of the project, and I think it will help retail downtown. Thank you.
Roxioni.
It would have been interesting to be in the conversations back in the 70s or maybe even earlier when they talked about closing off the mall, the Baltimore Street. There were no guarantees with that either. And there are no guarantees anymore. The way the economy is and the way the economy's going with globalization, small towns are struggling everywhere, not just at Cumberland, Maryland. If you stand up at Queen City Drive in January and look down the mall, Paul, I don't think people who love it because of the dining will find it that attractive at that time of the year. And it's got to be a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, 365-day proposition. I see it as an opportunity again, back to the livability thing that I mentioned earlier, it's one more piece of it. If you'd see the designs, and they're meeting now with the Corcoran Group, it's going to be gorgeous. We need to fill in we need to get more money, and it looks like that's very favorable too. John's right. The governor is a big supporter of this, and Wayne is also correct. The initial money comes simply because there's a transportation thing involved. My biggie, personally, is that fiber optic cable, to have the state-of-the-art fiber optics there for businesses that could locate in not just stores, but businesses that now, the way the world is today, could locate in our upper stories of our businesses. And there is money today available for upper story development. So again, it's a complex thing. It's not just opening up the mall and having cars down there. You've got to look at the big picture, in my opinion. Thank you.
Seth Bernard.
Yeah, so as Rocket just mentioned, the issue on its surface is, the improvement of infrastructure that we're going to be getting down there for future generations of businesses. Pedestrian malls all across this country are failing. I think Cumberland is one of 75 that's left in the entire United States where their main street is closed to traffic. When this issue first came up, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, one of the first things I did was I went downtown and talked to a good amount of the business owners that were down there. The vast majority of business owners want the mall open. There are a few who are resistant because they're afraid that outdoor dining will go away. The plans that I've seen, the conversations that I've had, that is not going to be the case. We will absolutely have everything that we love about our downtown, outdoor dining, just the general small town atmosphere, with the added benefit of visibility, accessibility, and just a general feel of electricity, of people that are living downtown and shopping downtown. Because if you stop down there on a Tuesday in December, it's a ghost town. So I think just on its surface, that sort of thing turns tourists away. They think, well, there's no one here. There's no point. So.
Thank you. That will okay. We got a 30-second retort, Roxione.
Not really a retort, just one more comment. Manhattan Social is located down where they are currently, and we hope they succeed because they heard it was going to be opened up. And I think I have an appreciation for the businesses that are afraid, but I want to point to the fact that I was one of one or two people who, and I don't know how this square was cyclists, but I thought that we could widen the area for dining, since that is a big deal for people. I love eating down there too, and put the cyclists in the street and not have a special lane, so that allowed for more space for dining. And a couple people were on board with that, and I think I was able to get that through, and I like that, and I think that maybe we got closer to making everybody happy.
Okay, very good. That is going to conclude our forum. I'd like to compliment each of you on your stances and your willingness to come forward and serve our community. No matter what you've done, you've given us a choice, and a clear choice here this evening. We will continue with our forum and candidates for mayor coming up in about 5 minutes here on 1270 AM WCBC, 103.1 FM, and WCBCRadio.com, along with our Facebook feed, courtesy of Allegheny Media, on our WCBC Facebook page. Back after this. And we have returned to Allegheny College of Maryland and the Continuing Education Building with our forum featuring the candidates for mayor of Cumberland. Joining us here, incumbent Brian Grimm and challenger Ray Morris here, and we appreciate, gentlemen, you participating this evening. We will give 90 seconds to answer each of the questions. And, you know, if you get to 90 and you hear the bell, I might give you a paragraph to finish up because some of the questions may be a little bit, you know, a little bit more. Plus, it's a one-on-one deal, and we want to keep it as loose as we can. And if you have a retort, you can put your hand up. I'll give you 30 seconds to retort with. Mary Kleitz, again, doing our timing. She'll show a red card with 30 seconds to go in your original answer and ring the bell at the end of time. And with our first question, and answering first will be Brian Grimm. Brian Gowans will put the question. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. We'll get the West Side Bridge issue right off the bat. Ray, you've suggested in the past that perhaps the City Council was a little slow in responding to the bridge issue, and they could have done it maybe a few years earlier. Mr. Mayor, I think you suggested that Mr. Morris, in his position, superintendent of CSX, perhaps could have been proactive and taken some steps to do something over the years, but did not. Could I get you both to respond to that and each other's role and what you could or could not have done on the West Side Bridge issue?
Brian Grimm, you're first.
Absolutely. The reality is that the bridges have declined for a number of years. This is not something that's just happened over the 8 years that I've been in office. And it did happen in part while the superintendent, Ray Morris, was in office in that position. What I recognize is that the operations manager doesn't control everything from CSX. However, you expect whenever the highest level person in your community lives in the community as superintendent that they would add some support. Instead, what I heard in the last opportunity for us to meet and have a forum was pointing out that CSX had offered to the city of Cumberland an opportunity to fix the bridges just a few years ago in 2015. That's true. What Mr. Morris said is true. But it's only the first part of the story. Because if you follow the line of thought that he was providing, that we've already had the opportunity to fix these bridges, the reality is he'd be advocating for a program that would install 11-foot high retaining walls on Washington Street. It would advocate for property acquisitions and demolitions in the historic district. In fact, I have the HDR study from CSX, the company he worked for at the time, showing that those were the options available to us in 2015 that he apparently advocates for today. You're right, Mr. Morris. I didn't support that in 2015. I don't support it today. I don't think we should tear down the historic homes, and I don't want 11-foot high retaining walls on Washington Street.
Ray Morris, you're next.
Well, I actually believe that while I was the terminal superintendent, I did something to help support the West Side Association. As a matter of fact, I have with me a copy of the letter that the West Side, the Washington Street Association sent to Miss Ellen Fitzsimmons, and if you read the first sentence in the letter, it says, "We are addressing this letter to you at the suggestion of Ray Morris, Terminal Superintendent of CSX in Cumberland, Maryland." And the reason that the Washington Street Association had reached out to me was because they believed the city was failing to represent them properly in rebuilding the bridges. The HDR study, and if I remember correctly, actually it was the city that picked the consultant that would do the study, but yes, CSX paid for the study. And what happened when the study came back and it showed a report saying that maybe we should build an 11-foot retaining wall and tear down some properties? Well, the city ran into a roadblock. And what did they do? They stopped. They simply stopped and said, well, if that's what it has to be, we just can't build a bridge on the west side of Cumberland on Washington Street. And nothing was done. Nothing. Absolutely nothing was done. What you need to do when you run into a roadblock is you need to figure out another route to go. If you've got a goal to get somewhere, you need to get there. In football, they call that yards after contact. When a running back gets hit, does he just go down? Or does he keep struggling to go ahead and gain more yards? The city just went down.
You want to retort? You got 30 seconds, Brian.
Mr. Morris ignores the fact that since that time there have been ongoing negotiations with CSX. CSX stonewalled us as well. They have stonewalled us in height. They've stonewalled us in other elements in the negotiations. And it really wasn't until a CSX train struck 2 additional bridges that they truly came to the table and wanted to get something done. This administration has consistently been working to try to get a solution. We have consistently been committed to a 3-bridge solution that has been unwavering and unchanged, and I'm committed to 3 bridges without 11-foot high retaining walls on Washington Street.
Ray, did you have 30?
I have with me a copy of the letter written by CSX in November of 2017. It shows a complete willingness by CSX to work with the city. Any reasonable person who reads this letter will understand that the city is looking for a partner and has been for 2 years or longer with the asking for the federal money to take care of the bridges on the west side, and CSX was looking for a partner. The city remained steadfast that CSX owned the bridges and they were going to have to bear the full brunt of the cost.
All right, we go on with our second question in this forum. Greg Larry asking the question.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, the bridges in Rolling Mill are 2 of the big issues, but I don't want to gloss over the bridges issue real quickly, so I'd like to hit it one more time with you if you could. Do you think that given this problem dates back now a year with Cumberland Street, a little shorter time with Fayette, but a long time with Washington Street, that ownership has been something that has kind of stalled it? Had we made some different negotiations involving the ownership of the bridges, that it could have come together quicker than it is coming together with the bridges?
Going first will be Ray Morris.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I believe that. I think when you're stuck on the ownership and you don't really take a clear look at what the offer is, the 80% federal funding, and you go back to what CSX was really saying, and I'm going to be honest, my memory is a little unclear whether CSX had said they would cover the city's match or they would match the city. That was the way it was explained to me by the people working for CSX at the time. Cover the match meant that CSX was willing to fully fund the city's portion. Match simply meant that CSX would have paid 50%, reducing the cost to the city to simply 10% of the bridge. If this tack had been taken 3-4 years ago, these bridges never would have been struck. They would have already been built, and we wouldn't be dealing with these issues that we've been dealing with on the west side of town, where we simply can't get from one place to another this year.
Brian Grimm.
Certainly, when we're discussing the history of the bridges, there's an issue here. Mr. Morris keeps bringing up the opportunity, the reality that there was an offer on the table before. To quote the HDR report from CSX, any improvement to the Washington Street Bridge will significantly impact the neighborhood. To achieve the requirement of 21.9 inches, the Washington Street Bridge will be raised 5 feet and retaining walls of approximately 11 feet will be required to minimize property acquisitions. I stood in opposition to that. The reality is CSX owned the bridges. They own the bridges today. They understand that. They're willing at this point to offer a quitclaim deed to the city of Cumberland. You know, it seems to me that if you don't own something, you can't give it away. But they're willing to give it away to the city of Cumberland, and we have reached a deal. In fact, I've been very proud of the fact that we have reached a deal to get 2 of the bridges built now. We're working on the 3rd one, and in fact, we've even forwarded the negotiations in the past 4 months to the point that we can actually retain the Green Street tracks on that overpass at the current height, make some other modifications that are agreeable to the city as well as to CSX that allow us the opportunity to replace Washington Street Bridge. My commitment all along has been public and visible. I'm committed to 3 vehicular bridges. We have 2 of the 3 in place, a deal, and I believe that we're going to get the 3rd one as well.
Ray Morris has 30 seconds.
At the September 11th Mayor and City Council meeting, City Solicitor Mike Cohen stated that there is no documentation about anyone owning the bridges, but yet the mayor still insists that CSX owns the bridges. I think that attitude is exactly what has created this Mexican standoff, so to speak, between CSX and the city. As long as the city wasn't willing to budge, CSX wasn't willing to budge.
Brian, would you like to continue.
I simply state that, again, we have worked in 4 months and we have achieved the result of 2 bridge solutions already, and we are close to a 3rd one. I think the results speak for themselves. CSX and the City of Cumberland have been working cooperatively these past couple of months, and CSX striking their bridges really brought this to a head. I think the results speak for themselves. We've got 2 of 3 already done.
Thank you. We continue now with another question from Brian Gallants.
A couple of parts to this one, and Mayor, this comes with the territory since you've been in office for some time. First one seems like a minor issue. You've come under fire in recent weeks for having a red line painted in front of your property. As it was a front page article in the newspaper, people have come to the meeting and complained about it, suggesting that you may have used your position to have that taken care of. And more recently, a letter to the editor accused you and your fellow council members of taking kickbacks for the rolling mill project. Are those, could you address those accusations or criticisms? And for Mr. Morris, are those valid criticisms or accusations?
Brian, you go first.
Well, I file both of those in the folder of nonsense. The reality is the red line issue isn't an issue at all. When you repaint a red line, you go through the correct process to do so. There's no problem. It's obvious that there was red paint there before, and we can dispute all that we want to, whether or not the color is the same today or silliness like that. But the reality is it was repainting of a red line. It went through the appropriate process, and I'm not wasting any more time on it. I believe that when you waste the time of the city engineer, the city clerk, the city administrator, the director of public works, you're wasting far too much taxpayer dollars, and that's what's happened at this point. It's going no further. As far as kickbacks, you know what? The reality is anybody can say anything they want to. That doesn't mean they have to be backed up with fact. Ms. Miltenberger's letter to the editor was riddled with, quite frankly, again, nonsense. Just because you can dream something up and put it in print doesn't mean there's any truth or fact to it. And I stand behind the fact that both of those things should be filed in the nonsense folder.
Ray, what do you think?
Well, as far as the red line goes, I really don't know whether there was historically a red line there or not. I'm not disputing that there was or there wasn't, and so that's, to me, is not a matter that we really need to worry about too much. If there was a red line, there was a red line. If there wasn't, then maybe somebody has a complaint, but I don't have any information as to whether there was or there wasn't. As far as the letter from Ms. Miltenberger, I have seen absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the mayor or any other members of the city council have taken any kickbacks, and quite frankly, I simply don't believe that she was accurate in her statement, and that also is a non-issue to me.
I don't think we're going to need 30 seconds to retort either way. Next with our question will be Greg Larry. Greg?
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to shift gears and talk a little bit about the rolling mill. Been going on for, I think, 4 years. I want to get your assessment and take on the rolling mill project. Are you satisfied with the way this has unfolded, and are you happy with the current contract, with the way it's set up, with paying $600,000, the developer paying $600,000, and then being able to recoup that after completing 3 phases of the rolling mill project? Are you satisfied with the project to date?
Going first will be Ray Morris. Ray?
The concept of taking property right off of an interstate exit that's basically a blighted neighborhood and turning it into commercial property, and increasing the tax base, the concept is excellent. I see no fault in the city doing that. I think that was a good idea. How it was rolled out is my concern, in that, to me, when you want to do something like that, you get a drawing from a developer, you get a model from the developer, you bring all the people in from the neighborhood and you explain to them what it is you want to do. You explain everything from the tax base to what the value of the property is and what the premium would be that you'd be paying for their real estate above and beyond what the market value for their property is, and you do that up front. You do that up front so that you don't run into the controversy that we had, that there was a lack of transparency, that people were being forced into doing things. If you do everything right out in the open Everybody knows exactly what the other guy's getting. Everybody's getting the same premium on their market value, and you don't have to worry about somebody worrying about what was said on one person's front porch versus what was said on someone else's front porch. To me, that's the proper way to do it, is to be transparent and upfront from the beginning. But the idea to kickstart economic development in that area of the Rolling Mill project, I believe, was a viable project.
Brian Grimm.
Well, the approach that Mr. Morris takes, in my opinion, it would be inappropriate. I would not have walked into that neighborhood and slapped down some drawings and plans for what's going to happen and said, by the way, we're going to bulldoze your homes and this is what we're going to build. In fact, I would have done exactly what we did, which is approach each person as an individual, as a citizen of Cumberland that we respect, and say, we want to negotiate with you, the homeowner. We want to respect you as a citizen of Cumberland and negotiate with you. We're not doing this in public. We're not going to pit neighbor against neighbor. The reality is we did just that. We went to each individual person and we respectfully negotiated with each person. The annual taxes collected from that neighborhood were $23,000. I heard a number of figures that were thrown around in the city council forum earlier. The projection is that we're going to see an increase of over $100,000 in tax revenue from that site. The developer said to us, and I quote, "Cumberland created its own opportunity instead of just waiting for something to happen." I think that's a significant stamp of approval. It's a developer who is already accomplished in their field, who has come to Cumberland and said, you guys are doing the right thing, you're making the right steps forward, and yes, we invested significantly, $3.5 million, despite what you've heard otherwise, into making that site an opportunity for the city of Cumberland. And all along, our point has been, we want to grow the tax base of Cumberland. Yeah, we're going to create some jobs in the process. Yeah, there are going to be some spin-off effects. But our intention all along has been tax-based growth. I heard challenges in the city council forum about how much money we've laid out for this project and how we're going to make that back. Look, here's...
Ray, I think it's your turn, isn't it? No. You're good. Anybody have a retort on that? No? I'll let you have another 30 seconds because I think Ray would approve.
Sure. I just want to respond to something that I've heard in the community, and this is nothing against Mr. Morris. The challenge that we have spent all this money on the project and we're not going to get back in our lifetime or X number of years just doesn't hold water. Because the reality is what we're going to receive back in the form of tax proceeds from the increased tax base exceed the debt service payments. That means every single year we're going to make back more money than we're spending to pay off the debt that is associated with the project. That's a win for the community.
All right, thank you. Ray, you can... Now you will retort.
Now I will take a little bit more time.
Okay.
Because I once again go back to how long this has taken, and I do believe that it had been handled differently in the beginning, because let's be quite honest about this. There are a lot of people in our community who are questioning the transparency and how this project was initiated, and that to me is a concern. Obviously, like I've said, the concept of doing this project overall in the long run is the correct thing to do. The money will come back in. This is a kickstart for the development in that area, and that entire project needs to be viewed as the whole.
Let me follow up on that with you, Ray. Would you approve the same developer that the city council did approve for this project, or is that, or could that be reopened? Or are you okay with that?
Oh no, I'm okay with Mr. Scott. I have met with Mr. Scott, and we have talked about the development going forward. And I think he is a good man and has a good company. I think that he's going to do the right thing.
And Brian, a follow up for you: is there a way to maximize the tax base impact that the city is going to see from this investment? Is there a way to do that?
Part of the way to maximize that is exactly the agreement that we approved just last night, and that is to exclude things that we don't want in the area that would drag the values down. We don't want bail bondsmen. We don't want tattoo parlors. We don't want methadone clinics. We don't want things like that that are not going to be of any value whatsoever to the community, and certainly would be of a low tax base value. We want hotels. We want things that are going to create profit in the community, and they're going to attract people from the interstate into the city. The reality is this developer is focused on getting folks off the interstate into the community to spend their money. We need to then take those people and get them into the rest of the community to continue to spend their money.
Nothing against Dollar General, but that seemed to be the buzzword of the first forum that we had with City Council. Is there anything you could do to dissuade the developer from putting a Dollar General there?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm neglecting the term, but the covenants of the agreement that we approved are now attached to the deed. That means that the developer can't simply ask for something else. They can't simply go through a judicial process. They are actually part of the conveyance. They're part of the deed itself that says you cannot build these things on that property, period.
Okay, and Ray, if you're elected, you're okay to build on that agreement then?
I think the agreement as it's written is good. I'm hoping to see something, quite frankly, a little bit more upscale than the places that were mentioned in the agreement. I was hoping to get something a little bit nicer, and I would be pushing for that, absolutely. But all in all, the agreement is written, and with the guidelines that during certain phases the developer gets his money back, and that's standard for a lot of these things. So I don't have any issue with that.
Very good. We move on to our next question, and Brian Gowans. Brian?
By far the biggest part of the city's budget goes toward public safety. Would you, for a cost savings measure, given the fiscal picture of the city facing, ever look at getting rid of the professional paid police and fire departments and go to a volunteer unit?
Brian Grimm, you are first to answer.
No. For me, it's that simple. No. The value of our fire department is too important. I have been somebody in this community who has called 911 probably more times than anybody else in the past year, both in my capacity working at Rocky Gap State Park as well as for a family member. The value of that service is life-saving. The response time of that service is extremely important. Quite frankly, I think we're a little bit too thin on our public safety services. We need to be investing more money into our special units, particularly in the police department. But would I get rid of the fire department? No, that's not an option for me.
Ray Morris.
No, I don't believe that it's an option to do away with the fire department either. I do believe that there is a combination of paid and volunteers that are used in other communities, and that should definitely be explored. But what we need to do is we need to sit down with the county. People have been talking for decades now that the city and the county need to work together for combined services on especially on emergency services, and that's something that needs to be done without question. Is part of that involved with the fire department and the paid men in the fire department? Well, absolutely, yes, it is. And we need to step forward on that, and we need to get with the county, and we need to design an overall system that is beneficial for the city and the county, and work together on that as quickly as we can to reduce the costs for both of us without having any effect on response times. But there are ways to reduce the cost and maintain the quality of the service that we have.
There's another question within that answer about cooperation with the county, and I'll jump into that one right now. Brian, when this came up, I don't know, maybe about 6-9 months ago, I think that generated the war on Cumberland comment from you that had occurred in reference to the county and having your allegation of war on Cumberland. Is it getting better? Have you had discussions? Because I know there was a period of time, I think it was about 4 months, okay, we'll get to it in September. Well, we're past September now. Are there talks going on?
The relationship between the city and the county is actually quite good at this point. The war in Cumberland is based in some comments from one particular county commissioner who on a constant basis seemed to be declaring war on the city of Cumberland. We have a great relationship otherwise. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with the county. We have plenty of opportunities for us to work together. We do so quite well, and I don't see any problems moving forward.
How about you, Ray Morris, about the war on Cumberland or better cooperation? Where do you want to go with that?
Well, on the war on Cumberland, when you have any type of conflict with that, that to me is that's two individuals both arguing back and forth with one another. And when it becomes open to the public, as that did, that makes it very difficult to ever to mend that fence. So I've got a feeling that although the mayor says that everything is great now, I really don't believe that is the case. I still believe there is some animosity from the people in the county, and that there are some issues that we need to work through. And quite frankly, I've been talking with the new county administrator and some people, the county commissioners, and I truly believe that I can assist in that. And when I look at it, with some of the things we're talking about, Mr. Grimm has been the mayor for the last 8 years and a city council member 2 years before that. we talk about something like the consolidation that has been on the table to be discussed for the last 20 years. He's been involved in the last 10, and we have not moved forward on that at all. So to say that it's simply that it was one individual in the county, I don't think is accurate.
Brian, you want to retort?
Sure. Collaboration of services and cooperation like that obviously takes two partners. I sat in this room during the primary election and said publicly that I support an idea for the county to actually supply some additional personnel to work out of our fire station to provide better EMS service to the community. The reality is the finances are stretched really thin. I want to touch on something because Mr. Morris has said several things publicly, including at the last forum. When it came to streets, he said the repaving needs to be sped up. When it came to economic development, he said if we were moving faster, we'd be able to see the benefits already. When it came to blight, he said we're making a sincere effort to remove the blight, but it's another area where we need to pick up the pace. When you look at our budget and you realize that almost 100% of what we collect in taxes is going to public safety, if you're going to talk about things like that and you're going to talk about the importance of public safety, I want to know from a candidate, are you interested in cutting public safety to speed those things up that you've said publicly, or would you raise taxes?
Ray, the question put to you, you got 30 seconds.
And absolutely. And this is key because he only looks at it in one way. He looks at it in a very simple way that you either have to raise taxes or cut services. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's very simple-minded. What the mayor's role is to go out and look and talk to people and ask. And he doesn't ask. He doesn't make the ask. He doesn't go out there. When the governor comes to town, he doesn't go to see him. He didn't go to Pace this year. This is how you work with people. You have to develop a network and a relationship. You've got to be able to work with the delegation. If you're not asking, you're not going to get anything from people.
Brian, you've been addressed in that answer. Do you want to continue?
What I heard there was a non-answer. The reality is things are as simple as you can cut expenses or you can increase revenues. Are you going to cut expenses when public safety is such a significant portion of your budget, or are you going to raise taxes? Those are important things. Sure, I didn't go to Pace this year. There's city representation there. There's plenty of people there that are well representing the city of Cumberland. I've been there 7 out of the past 8 years. The reality is the budget is that simple. It's like your home budget. If you run out of money, you're going to cut something that you're spending money on, or you're going to go get another job to generate some more revenue. I want to know, when you're making so many significant promises to the community, when you've made those kind of quotes looking into a camera, where are you going to get the money from, or what are you going to cut?
Ray, one more time and we'll cut it off here.
You know, he keeps saying that I'm making promises. All I'm saying is if you're going to repave roads, don't brag about the fact you repaved 32 miles in the last 8 years, because you're not repaving roads fast enough for the life expectancy of the asphalt. The reality is, if you do a little research, you'll find out that we're continually getting further and further behind at the pace at which we're operating. For him to say that we don't need to pick up that pace, well, where are we going to be 20 years from now?
That's a nice exchange. Thank you, gentlemen. You've cleared up a lot of things for our listeners. Our next question comes from Greg Larry.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to ask you, gentlemen, about the Cumberland Economic Development Corporation. The CEDC is doing a lot of the development for the city now. It was created a couple of years ago as a nonprofit. Are you satisfied with this arrangement of having a CEDC? And do you think that's the way to go forward with our development in the community?
Ray Morris goes first.
Quite frankly, I like the CEDC.
We might have to share a microphone. No, we're good. We're good.
Oh, okay. Oh, here we go. Quite frankly, I'm fine with the CEDC. I think it is a group of very knowledgeable businessmen in our community who add a lot of input into the right direction for our city to go. I believe initially the first individual who was the director was a little difficult for people to deal with, but I'm very happy with Mr. Kelly and the way he's going about things. I think the CEDC is fine. We need to make sure that although they are not a city department, that they are working in the direction we always want them to and keep them in our guidance. To me, the CEDC and the Allegheny County development needs to be together. We need to look to put the two of them in the same building if at all possible. That to me is what's critical going forward, is coordination between the CEDC and the Allegheny County Development. That way that they are working together, and that's how we'll all prosper going forward.
Ryan Grimm.
I'm happy with the CEDC in the sense that the intention all along was a public-private partnership. And the idea was to leverage the assets of our current business community and the public assets that we were pumping into economic development for the same purposes. I think moving forward that has certainly been working for us. And I'm happy to hear what Mr. Morris is saying in reference to the idea that we have more cooperation with the county. This administration did exactly that in creating the CEDC. Our intention all along was to include the universities, to include Frostburg, the city, and Allegheny County. And in fact, the county administrator, Mr. Butler, has actually joined the CEDC. All along, the vision that Mr. Morris points out is the vision of this administration, to continue to engage the economic development opportunities in our community and do so on a holistic basis with all the partners at the table. That's absolutely the best way forward.
I think we have agreement. We move on with our next question, and it comes from Brian Gowans. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. With the mall to order reopened downtown mall, will the Downtown Development Commission remain relevant, or is it time to consider abolishing the DDC?
Brian Grimm, you're up first.
I'm not ready to answer that yet, because the reality is whether or not the formal organization of the DDC exists or not, the intentions of the DDC are certainly important. That's an organization that represents the interest of the tax-paying business owners downtown, as well as the tenants of the sites. The downtown project is significant for our community. It's part of our economic development strategic plan. It's one of those many sites that we are simultaneously working on and have been working on now for a couple of years. It touches the CEDC issue, and that since creation of that and since the partnering of public and private dollars, we've been able to move several of these sites forward. The DDC's purpose will continue to be real no matter what title we give the organization and that group of people, and I certainly am always interested in knowing what those folks downtown say. We hear oftentimes from the DDC an opinion, and we assume that represents the business owners and property owners downtown. We need to make sure that, in fact, it does represent what all of those folks downtown believe.
Ray Morris.
And I have to agree with that. I don't think that you automatically do away with the DDC. You still want the input of the property owners. You still want the input of the businesses, and it's important that we may restructure in some way. There may be some things that we change, but all in all, we need to keep those lines of communication open and going forward.
All right, one more question from Greg Larry. Greg?
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to switch gears, talk a little bit about tourism. I'd like your gentlemen's thoughts on the activities at the Canal Place, with the train, with the footer over there. We've had some people that have not been happy with the Canal Place. It's expensive for the state to keep that going. They have some shops over there that have struggled, but they're looking forward to the footer. And I'd like to see if you gentlemen look forward to the footer, and also your thoughts on the train as an attraction for the area and to help with tourism.
Ray Morris.
Well, I think that Canal Place, obviously, the state is looking for a restructuring on how that is to work. It's not something that the city is going to take over. That would be something much more in line for the county. And I think, quite frankly, in my conversations with Mr. Butler, he understands that is something that they would be doing. But looking at the overall concept of Canal Place, the Riverwalk project, I think the Riverwalk project going forward is going to be critical for tourism. I think by putting in a location where people can get their kayaks and their canoes and put them in is going to be critical for tourism and what goes on in the downtown area. And there needs to be a better connection, because when you talk about downtown, so many people, when they talk about downtown, they just want to talk about Baltimore Street, Center, and Liberty. The reality is it starts at Canal Place. It starts at the Footer Dye Building, and it goes all the way out. To me, and some people say, well, I'm including Midtown when I say this, but to me, it goes all the way out Queen City Boulevard. It goes all the way out to the Narrows. That is the downtown area that needs to be developed. Now, the train, obviously being a railroad guy, yes, I think that the train is critical. I think the Scenic Railroad has done well getting the funding now in place for the 1309. They passed their steam test. I don't know if everybody heard it here a week and a half ago, but they're making steam over there, and hopefully it'll be running by the end of the year.
Brian Grimm.
All of these tourism entities are extremely important to the city of Cumberland, and one of the things that we need to do is stop calling it simply Canal Place and downtown. The reality is it's all downtown. These sites are connected, and we need to constantly work on the visibility connection between them, but Canal Place is downtown. I was on the front burner of the Footer Dye Works project. The reality was that there was a lot of question about whether or not that project was going to move forward. I was at Pace several years ago when that decision was being made, handing out little yellow buttons that said Fund Footer, talking to legislators from around the state as well as our local delegates and our local officials to make sure that that project moved forward. And I'm happy to report to you, as we all know, that the Footer Dye Works project happened. An investor came in, a developer came in, invested in the project. There are people living there. There's a business that's going to open there. And it happened without city taxpayer dollars. The benefit, of course, of the city of Cumberland is tremendous. We're going to have business there. We have quality housing opportunities there. And eventually, this all contributes to our tax base. So I've been happy to be part of the project. And the reality is Canal Place, the Footer Dye Works, the Scenic Railroad, they're all part of the tourism equation. They're all extremely important.
Couple of follow-ups on the downtown area. There has been a emphasis on public restroom access downtown. Any idea, or would you recommend where you would put them? Is there a place downtown that you're looking at and saying, oh, okay, I think we could go there?
I haven't actually looked at exactly where I think the restrooms need to be. No, I haven't gotten that far into it. But I agree there need to be public restrooms downtown, especially when you're going to still be able to do the events that we're doing. And there are a lot of patrons of the businesses that are going to need to find a public restroom. And I think that is something we need to do. Quite frankly, the streetscape of Baltimore Street is the most important thing that we are working on right now. When the Corcoran Group comes in with their design, we need input from everyone involved. We need input from the owners of the property. We need input from the Allegheny Arts Council. People need, nothing against Mr. Kelly at the CEDC, but he's a lawyer. I think we need to make sure that the people with an artistic mind are looking at our streetscapes, and all of them are included in that.
Okay, Brian, how about you?
I've said all along that I think restrooms downtown, availability of restrooms would be a positive thing. What we have to work through again is the details, and the devil is always in the details. Who would be responsible for maintenance of them? Who would be policing them, quite frankly? You know, I've been on the public record saying that I don't support the underpass continuing to be open under Queen City Drive because it has become a public restroom for so many folks. I don't want to try to take care of a problem like that and create another problem in our downtown district. So I want to work through those details before I put my stamp on saying, yes, we're going to open public restrooms and they're going to be in a certain geographic location. I think they have a lot of value, but we have to work through some of the details before we settle on where that would be.
And a note about a potential special taxing district for the downtown area. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Necessary? Should you stop it? I think downtown businesses right now pay a little bit more for maintenance, don't
Absolutely. It already exists, Paul, and it's historically been there for quite some time. In fact, it has been grandfathered into law right now such that in other areas where you create a special taxing district, they have to have set parameters and set time limits in which they expire. This one is already in place and doesn't have an expiration date. So it's always important, again, for the DDC entity that exists to give us input on whether or not they want to continue that tax and what they want. Oftentimes, I have asked them myself, do you want to continue to have that tax? And they say yes, because we appreciate the services, the freshly planted flowers, the nicely shoveled sidewalks in the winter. There are a lot of benefits to paying that tax.
Ray?
And I think we're going to, once again, Brian and I are going to agree on that. This is something that the DDC and the downtown businesses, if they are willing to pay and they appreciate the services they get for the taxes that they are paying for that, then yes, it could continue. But we need to make sure that that's truly what they want and negotiate with them going forward and work out what is acceptable to them also. I mean, let's be honest, we don't want to give up any tax base if we don't have to, but we we need to make sure that we're actually providing the services once it is opened up and there's a roadway through down there.
Well, we finished up the forum, I believe. Is there an issue that you have, either of you gentlemen, that you think we should talk about before we wrap it up? We're going to give you the same rights we give to city council, you know?
I'm certainly open to our media professionals here, and if there are any questions that come to their mind, any front page news articles that have been prominent
Except about
lately,
red lines,
except
right?
about red lines.
Okay, Ray.
No, I'm fine. I don't have anything additional. If you all have anything more, I'm willing to keep going. But I'm fine with what we've done so far.
Greg, Brian, are we good?
We could continue asking many more questions, but I know you got more programming to get to. So if you want to wrap it up, that whatever you want to do.
We will do that. I want to give you gentlemen both the compliment I gave to the city council candidates. You've given us a choice. You were good tonight. You explained what you were, what you're about. You agreed and you disagreed. That means our future is going to be okay in Cumberland. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in via Facebook. I'd like to thank our partners at Allegheny Media, Ryan Brenneman. I don't know what we'd do without you, but you're helping us out a lot on Facebook and in our media presentation of this. For Brian Gallons and Greg Larry and Mary Kleitz and all of us at WCBC, have a great evening. Thank you.